Hi, I'm Kris Berry-Trow and I'm taking over today's episode. Our purpose at Link Group is to connect people with their assets, and one of the teams which I think perfectly encapsulates this is our corporate and employee dealing team, who are responsible for buying and selling shares for some of the world's most distinguished listed companies and their employees. Buying and selling shares in publicly traded companies represents a fundamental pillar of our economy. So in this episode, I'll be chatting with Valentine and Gavin, whose day-to-day role involves exactly that. Their team also celebrated their 10-year anniversary this month, so I'm hoping they can share some expert insight from their unique perspectives of the financial markets. So without further ado, let's get straight into our conversation. Thanks for joining us, Craig and Gavin. I thought I'd start by giving you a bit of a chance to introduce yourselves. Gavin, I know in particular you've been in the city for sort of 40 years, so I'm sure a wealth of experience to share. And Craig, with your background in operations, it'd be really good to learn a bit more about yourself. Craig, should we kick off with you?
Sure. I've sort of been around 20 and a bit years now. I was fortunate enough many years ago to sort of land on my feet as a temp job actually for NatWest stockbrokers booking their trades. Since then I've been lucky enough to work for various industry leading sort of operational teams before joining Link as part of the corporate employee dealing operations team that we set up. Since then, being at Link, I've kind of evolved into a sort of more of a BD role and now into sort of leading the BD team.
Craig and Gavin, a bit about your background?
Yes, I've worked in various stockbrokers since leaving school. I was trained by a very good office manager, did settlements, and then through my career moved into business development and thoroughly enjoy talking to issuer companies, employees and shareholders to help them with their share dealing requests.
Brilliant. So you're definitely Link Group's corporate and employee share dealing experts, something that I've definitely learned a lot more about since working with you both over the last 18 months. But perhaps before we get into some of the more in-depth areas of your knowledge, Craig, you can maybe just give us a very basic overview of what share dealing is.
Well, essentially, buying and selling shares on behalf of shareholders, whether they're employees or senior employees or share plan related. There's a sort of a myriad really of variations of the reasons why, but ultimately trading in the market is buying and selling, whether it's limited to price wise, but actually from a Link perspective, we tend to focus more on sort of a share plan environment when it comes to all employee for issuers share plans or discretionary share plans. We have an online and telephone service for our retail customers, which predominantly is sort of a certificated service, but then we also offer quite a broad range of corporate sponsored nominees for various issuers also. We also sort of tie in quite nicely when we come to sort of various custody services as well, much like the CSM product.
Yeah, the corporate sponsor nominee is primarily for private shareholders, but we also do nominee services for employee benefit trusts. These are trusts that are linked to issuers who have share plans, and we need sort of speedy delivery of shares. So keeping them in the nominee actually makes that work very, very well. We also have our issuer clients who buy for treasury, and we offer custody accounts for them as well, so that the shares are in the CREST dematerialised environment.
And is there any such thing as a typical day for you, Gavin? I mean, what could you tell us a bit maybe about what your typical day looks like?
Probably the most typical day is talking to clients, whether that be issuer company clients, shareholders and employees. So it's a right mixed bag of just dealing with whatever comes in. But obviously from perspective of our business development side, it's also going to find those companies that actually aren't aware of our services and bring them into the fold.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gavin. So it's 10 years this month since your team's been supporting listed companies, executives, investors and employees, which is quite a milestone. Craig, I know it's something you're really proud of. But what are some of the key market trends that you've observed during this time?
Well, there's been a number over sort of the 10-year tenure, as it were. I think market regulation is probably the key one. There's been a number of them that have been fairly significant. MiFID II, the CAS rule changes, CDD and AML, there's been a huge change in those. Brexit, I think, was probably a fairly notable one as well, for the right and wrong reasons, unfortunately, for the industry. They're certainly the highlights from a regulatory perspective. I think over the years we've sort of noticed from sort of issuer perspective, so our clients' perspective, when it comes to sort of share plans, I think they're certainly more willing to now offer sort of all employee share plans to a far more global audience, which is great, but also it brings its own challenges at the same time. I think we've also noticed that from a share plan perspective, but from a discretionary sort of point of view, the nil cost option has sort of superseded the historical sort of option price quoted. So you're looking at sort of LTIPs and DBPs rather than the old-fashioned sort of ESOS, as it were. So they're kind of sort of the more noticeable things that I've probably seen over the last 10 years.
Great. So, Gavin, looking forward, what trends do you think investors and companies are going to encounter in the coming years? Maybe not the next 10, because I think that's probably too far to look ahead, but in the next few years, what do you think are going to be some of the things that investors and companies are going to see? Yeah,
there's going to be quite a revolution, I think, within the industry. At the moment, the UK defaults into share certificates if you're buying shares, and there's an awful lot of investors out there with share certificates. However, there is now a project on the go, and the consultation's just been completed with service providers on dematerialising as mandatory, and that follows, the likes of America and Europe, where there aren't any share certificates. How we get to that is probably the biggest challenge, but again, it's one of those things that to move forward, help liquidity. Losing share certificates or not knowing where your share certificates are has been a problem throughout the era of the stock exchange. So to make it all a lot better, T1 dematerialisation will hopefully help that. The other thing that is paramount at the moment is the government's change to the capital gains tax regime. They reduce it from 12,000 to 6,000 annual allowance this year. Next year, from April 6th, it goes down to 3,000 per annum. That's quite a small allowance when you're looking at sort of, say, employee share plans. Because if you are wanting to sell your shares, obviously depending on the gain, it's reducing that. One of the things that we look at quite seriously is when companies offer their share plans to their employees. What they do is, especially with sort of share saves, they actually go out, invite all the people to apply for the grant. But what they don't look at is what's going to happen at the end of the term, whether that's 3 or 5 years. There can be considerations on the market liquidity of those shares should everyone want to sell. Now, with ShareSave, hopefully the issuer, the company, is looking at people becoming shareholders. In reality, if the share price has risen since the grant, people might want to take benefit of that difference and the gain. But again, that can cause market liquidity problems. So Craig and I, we talk to issuers and maybe their corporate brokers as to actually managing those share sales into the market in an orderly manner.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gavin. A lot happening over the next few years then. I'm definitely very aware of the digitisation task force that you referred to. And yeah, definitely that financial education and wellbeing piece around the CGT is really interesting. So Craig, are there any tips that you can maybe offer issuers or I guess investors and employees to help stay ahead of the curve in this changing time?
It's a tricky one, to be fair. I think historically the standard response, I think, would always be the services that we tend to offer are execution only, and therefore we tend to avoid sort of providing sort of any kind of advice or tips to the future, just in case I don't accurately predict them.
Very wise, very wise. And I couldn't sort of not speak to you both around dealing with the launch of our new Investor Centre app that's coming down the track. Do you see that as a real positive for investors and employees from a dealing perspective?
Absolutely. I think the fact that it allows the client base to have a portfolio viewer which will allow to have all of their holdings in one place is fantastic. Not just for our retail clients, but also for our employee benefit trusts. I think moving forward, the sort of issuer piece as well that sits behind it. So the miracle piece, I think that is a huge benefit for our actual direct sort of clients as well. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be part of the link business, that's for sure.
It is. Gavin, any final thoughts from you, perhaps?
The one thing that has just come to mind is, whilst we have obviously all the share dealing and the investor centre all coming online, one of the things that Craig and I definitely are very aware of are the senior managers, directors of companies who have governance requirements, obligations. What we would like to do is ensure that the issuer and those individuals concerned, if they have got share dealing requirements, that they actually talk to us first so that we can actually help manage that through, again, in an orderly manner, and also to assist in the regulatory news announcements as well. So there's an awful lot going on that we get involved in to help everybody make the most of the stock market.
Sounds like there's a lot more than just buying and selling shares in the
Very
world
much so,
of
yes.
corporate employee share dealing. And that's a wrap. Thank you to Craig and Gavin for taking the time to share their insights. If you'd like to learn more about how our dealing experts can support you in the future, I'll leave a link in the description. Finally, don't forget that you can also subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us on. That way, you won't miss an upload. Thanks for tuning in, and over and out.